Hello, I'm Nick Beggs. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today on location from the London Bass Guitar Show in London.
Yeah, can you hear it?
I can feel it.
It's all around.
It is.
It's all around us.
I don't know if they can appreciate it quite like we can appreciate
They're feeling it through us.
That's right. By the way, this is Nick Beggs from Kajagoogoo, our special guest today, and so happy to spend a few minutes with you to share with these nice people a bit about your life and your bass playing career and whatever else comes out of our mouths.
Well, thank you.
So hello, Nick.
Hello, hello, hello.
Let's start from the beginning. I know you are from the UK, and I want to get the story about your initial exposure to music and how you became a bass player. Let's start there.
Well, my initial exposure to music was through the British charts, the pop music of the day in the 70s. I grew up listening to all the contemporary stuff. And
Such as?
well, you know, Olivia Newton-John, Shawadi Wadi.
She's from Australia.
Yeah, but she was big hit in the UK. And then, you know, people like T-Rex and David Bowie and the Beatles. And then the nuance set in. I started to identify stuff I really liked, like Yes and Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath and the heavier stuff like Led Zeppelin.
I've heard of all of those bands.
That's when I started around the age of 15, I think. Started to really take an interest in bass players like Chris Squire and Geddy Lee and Jaco Pastorius.
Did you play another instrument before the bass?
Well, one day my father left a drum kit in my room and he disappeared and I didn't see him for a long time. And when he came back, I could play the drums up to a certain level, you know. And I'd take the drum kit to school and play it with the music teacher. This was highly unusual. And I felt like a bit of a celebrity. And I thought, well, you know, this sets me aside from everybody else in the school.
You were about how old?
10. And so things moved on. The drum kit had to go because it was too noisy. We had to move house. And I managed to find an acoustic guitar with 4 strings on it. And I used to play that.
The right 4 strings?
The right 4 string. There's serendipity, you see. Somebody looking out for me.
Well, those are the heavier ones, so they don't break as readily.
That's right, yeah. I tried.
So, with Jaco and Chris Squire and Geddy Lee and those people, did you discover them after you discovered this 4-string guitar, or were you already playing the bass and then you discovered who the bass heroes were?
During and before and during. But I have to be brutally honest, it was punk rock that actually galvanized my desire to perform. And I formed a comedy punk band called The Vomit. And it was, I played acoustic guitar, and a friend played Waste Paper Basket. And one of the guys shouted into a microphone. We made some albums. One was called The End of the World, and they were punk piss takes.
About how old were you at that point?
12.
I love it.
12, yeah. And I loved punk, actually. I did love it. But it was,
I interviewed Mike Watt a couple of times.
Yeah, well, you know, these are very important people. But all music is absurd as well as wonderful. I mean, progressive rock is perfectly absurd and beautiful and wonderful. And so is punk. Punk is absurd and wonderful. And so are we. Me in particular. Absurd.
And wonderful.
Oh, stop it. You tease.
All right. Well, I mean, fast forward a bit to your career. I mean, you were a celebrity in a small pond, and then you became a bigger celebrity in a much bigger pond. So can you fill in some of the gaps for us, or can we actually, rather than fill in the gaps, fast forward to the Kajagoogoo days and the other stuff for which you are known?
It's funny, isn't it? Because I never feel like a celebrity. I never felt like a celebrity. My daughter lays this burden at my feet quite regularly. And I said, I'm not a celebrity, I'm a musician. And not a very good one at that. I try to be better, try to improve all the time. But I don't feel celebrity is something I've ever looked for. In fact, in many respects, it's something I kind of reject. I think if you're famous, that's a distraction. I think if you are true to what it is you do and you love it, that's the thing that's most important, that should be at the top of the CV, and this is the thing that I feel most strong about.
Did you ever work at anything other than being a musician?
I was an A&R man for Phonogram
Oh, that's right.
for a very short period of time, which I both loved and hated in equal measure. I had some wonderful times and terrible times, and I'm grateful for it.
Okay. Let's talk a little about Kajagoogoo, because that I think you are perhaps best known for, if I'm not mistaken. Would you agree with
It's
that?
the most records I sold. Never had another project like that sold that kind of volume, and the royalties are still quite nice.
So tell us about the band.
The band was originally a four-piece band called Art Nouveau, which was comprised of myself on lead vocals and bass, Steve Askew on guitar and lead vocals, Stuart Neal on keyboards, and Jez Strode on drummer, who's our drummer. We were about to release an EP on vinyl of the early demos from that band,
Really?
the Art Nouveau EP. So that will be out on Tone Float Records on vinyl.
Approximately when?
I don't know. In the interim period.
With a tease. All right, maybe
Yes,
we'll do a
I'd like
follow-up
that.
interview.
I'd like that.
All right. What's keeping you busy these days, Nick?
Well, I'm very fortunate enough to be a member of the Stephen Wilson Band, and I've been working with him on his new album, contributing files to that. My own solo project, The Mute Gods, which has been doing quite well. I have a triple album of solo stick music coming out on Cherry Red Records. That's coming out very shortly. Also, I've been contributing to a band called Fish on Friday.
Yes.
They're coming out soon. Doing things like this as well, doing some solo stuff, building that as a path. And two of my daughters got married this year as well, so that's been top of the calendar.
Did you have a double wedding for them? Or?
No, we.
Oh, lucky you! You had to make two weddings.
Yeah, well, it was equally impoverishing, both of them. One of them got married in July, I think. Yes, and the second one got married last week in Spain. So we were.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. Yes.
My son got married a few months ago,
Oh, really?
so I share my happiness with you.
Yes, it's a wonderful thing. Also, we don't have to worry about them so much. Not anymore.
That's right.
If
He's
things
off
they
my
get
payroll.
right, we're kind of off the hook now, aren't we? We can sort of fade into the background. That doesn't work.
I don't want to fade
That
into
doesn't,
the.
that doesn't work. That doesn't work. I'm joking.
We knew what you meant.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about your gear. And you mentioned the stick, and I told you earlier or yesterday, whenever it was, I had the joy of spending an entire afternoon at Emmit Chapman's house, checking out sticks and hearing the whole story and hanging out with his wife, who was lovely and so accommodating.
Yes.
Talk about, first of all, the Chapman Stick. Start anywhere you like.
I first discovered the instrument when I was at the bass centre in Wapping.
Oh, yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was before then. It was Romford, when it was just Trace Elliott. And there was a flyer, a little three-way folded piece of paper with an illustration on it and a picture of Tony Levin. And I picked it up and I thought, what the hell is this thing? And I took it and I meditated on it for a while at home. And it seemed absurd. But when I eventually saw Tony Levin playing the Chapman Stick with Peter Gabriel at Nebworth, UK, I think 77, I was totally engaged with the instrument in a way which was quite profound. Spool on, I was, playing bass during this period, but Kajagoogoo had some success and we changed personnel, that we needed a new lead singer. And the band said to me, if you become the new lead singer of Kajagoogoo, we will get you a Chapman Stick and you can become the new lead singer and the Chapman Stick player of the band in one go. So I felt that was my opportunity and I had to seize it.
How many strings do you have more than one?
I have a couple, yeah, I have, but both my sticks are 10-string instruments.
Okay.
You can get a 12-string version too, but I find the 10-string instrument more than enough for my needs. So,
I'm still trying to get my head around. These are tuned in fourths and these are tuned in fifths.
That's right.
I guess, but it was just incredible. Tell me obviously I know what is so special and so unique about it, but for those who may not know, why is the stick so amazing, so incredible.
Well, it's the one of the newest instruments to ever be invented since the saxophone and the bass guitar. It's one of the newest instruments. It's an instrument in its own right. It's a self-accompanying fretboard which you hammer onto in the same way as you would articulate a piano, but you do it onto the fretboard. The left hand tends to focus on the bass strings. The right hand will play the melody or chord shapes or the arpeggios or the contrapuntal parts and fill in the melody. It's liberating and terrifying in equal measure.
You've got to keep the action pretty low, I would imagine.
It is. It's set very fast because you have a very powerful humbucking pickup that's it's active, so it's got a battery in it. So when you hit the string, you get the resonance of the fret into the pickup very quickly, and it's all front end and a lovely tail of resonance.
It's interesting because I don't think Emmit set out to make a bass. I think he really had more of a guitar kind of thing in mind, and he just went low on the low end and high on the high end. You look like you may not have thought of that, or...
I always felt that Emmit was a guitarist,
yes,
and he approached it purely as a guitar instrument.
Exactly.
And people say to me, what's it got to do with bass? And actually, it's a very good question, because it doesn't really have very much to do with bass at all.
Yes.
No more than a piano has anything to do with bass. It has a bass clef, and on some of the instruments you can take it down to low B, which I do on a grand stick. And it has a wonderful bass register, which you can use in ensemble work, that gives you an originality and a new approach that people won't have heard before.
Yeah. There are some guitar players who play the stick,
Yes.
but it got the attention of you and Alfonso Johnson,
Yes.
and Kevin Keith and Steve
Yes.
Adelson and all the other great stick players.
Yeah.
What about a bass? Like a bass guitar? Do you still play that?
Oh yeah, I play a lot of bass. I have wonderful Spectre basses.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that's what I play predominantly. They've been very good to me over the years, and I find their instruments, I have a lot of them, and that's all I need now. I keep it simple, I use Spectre.
What kind of strings?
Spectre's own strings.
Okay.
And on the stick, it's Emmit Chapman's own strings too.
There you go.
They work really well. They understand. They're made specially for the instruments. They bring out all the harmonics and the resonances that you need. So there are other great other great strings out there. Ernie Ball are fantastic on Music Man basses. Strangely, who would go figure? We all know how that works. Rotosound sound pretty good on everything actually, particularly Rickenbackers.
Particularly what?
Rickenbackers.
Okay.
Yeah. It depends what you're looking for.
Right.
It's a universe of incredible creativity, and it's really wonderful to be a part of it.
That's right. I've toured a handful of string factories, actually Rotosound included.
Yeah.
GHS, a company in Florida. What were they? Black Diamond.
Yes.
Some others. Labella.
Uh-huh.
What about amps and effects and things like that?
At the minute, I'm using the TC Rebel heads. They're compact, and the multi-band compression is really good. And front of house engineers love that because it makes every note succinct and consistent. And on the Chapman Stick, that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any effects at all?
I use a multi-effects unit. I use the V-Bass, which is great. I've got a bunch of stomp boxes. I love Analog Man. Do you know Analog Mike from California?
I don't think I do.
California. He lives in, where is it? Miami. He's great. Check him out. Analog
Okay.
Man.
I was in Miami for 6 years, probably
Good
before
stuff.
he was doing his...
He's a real visionary.
What about the future? What else would you like to do that you haven't already accomplished? You've done a lot.
I'd like to develop my own live show and either take that out solo or with the Mute Gods, or maybe invited Mute Gods, because they're also busy, the Mute God band. Marco Minimum, Roger King, all those guys, they're so busy. It would be hard to get them all the time.
Yeah.
But if I could do a few shows with those guys to get things rolling, that would be great. And then maybe augment it when they're not available with other people I equally admire. Who knows? I like to think of the sky as being the limit.
And it is. It's funny you mentioned one-man show. One of the interviews I've done on the bass side about 600 plus interviews, and
Yes.
on the guitar side a bunch more. But Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and he was telling me about his one-man show.
Yes.
But he was telling me about the early days becoming a bass player and how he learned what to do and what not to do. And the British expressions, I don't know where some of them come from, but he says, and now I was just going about, happy as Larry.
Happy as Larry.
Happy as
Yeah, good old Larry. We all love Larry.
You know that expression?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You only say that like in these parts?
We say it. I say it wherever I am.
Do you say not on your Nelly?
Yeah, I do. I say very often not on my Nelly, or happy as a sand boy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another one.
I think we're getting off track here.
It'd be good to know the derivations of these terms.
Actually, I Googled, I think Larry was a boxer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He must have just won then.
He must have only won, I
Only
think.
won.
Yes, happy Larry. I want to ask you one question about music technique, bass technique.
Okay.
Because, between the bassing and the guitar, we've got 750 some interviews. And we've been known for that, but now we're becoming more and more well known for the bass instruction on For Bass Players Only. And a lot of the people we're attracting tend to be men in their 50s, sometimes 60s, sometimes a little older, sometimes a little younger, but in that general age range. And I wonder if you have any advice or wisdom that you can impart to those folks about what they should be thinking about. What is important about being a bass player? They're not necessarily career bound, they just want to play the bass.
Well, I'd say keeping it simple. Make sure you can play to a metronome, practice to a metronome. That's very important. Time is everything. I tend to rush. It's one of my idiosyncrasies. I have to be very aware and I have to pull back a lot. And it's something I've wrestled with over the years, but it's when you're nervous, you tend to do, the adrenaline will kick in. So I think practicing with a metronome is very important, and changing the BPM, and play as slow and as accurately as you can, rather than as fast and as shreddy as you can. Those would be a good place to start.
I've gotten into some pretty heated discussions with Jeff Berlin about the metronome. He says, no, don't use a metronome, absolutely not.
Well, Jeff Berlin is a force of nature, isn't he? He has an internal clock which is faultless, really.
Well, he says we all do. We just need to find it and bring it out.
Well, that's a nice idea. I'd like to entertain that as a concept. Okay. Yeah.
Last question, Nick. What would you be if you weren't a bass player, or a stick player, or an A&R man, something outside of music?
Well, my original course was to be an illustrator or a designer, to be in the art field. I was at college studying when I decided that I wanted to jump ship, and it took a lot. There was some massive upheavals in my life at the time, and I felt like it was a crossroads, and I had to listen to that inner voice, and I think that works for everybody in life. If you can listen to that inner voice, usually it'll see you okay.
Generally, that is good advice. I hope you're listening. Thank you so much, Nick. It's great sitting down with you for a few minutes, we've kind of corresponded online. I know we've been trying to get this interview for quite a long time, so I am just happy as Larry that we were able to do it.
Happy as Johnny.
Happy as Nicky. On location at the London Bass Guitar Show with our good friend Nick Beggs. I'm John Liebman. You're watching the #1 resource for bass player interviews, and now more and more people's favorite site for learning bass online, for BassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman. Let's play bass.